Hello, welcome to Exotic Gardening Live with me, Yorkshire Kris. Over the next half an hour, however long it's going to take, we're going to go through lots of overwintering questions for winter care for exotic plants in the garden. And basically, this stream will go on as long as the questions keep coming in. So, I mean, this weekend's been an absolutely pretty beautiful weekend in terms of warmth for October. So it's strange that we're sort of talking about overwintering plants, but the days are getting shorter. It's already dark outside now. And although it's not feeling cool yet, it doesn't feel really autumnal, certainly doesn't feel wintry, it won't be long until winter does arrive. So if you've, had your first sort of go at growing exotic or tender plants this year, I'll be going through how to overwinter them because my aim this winter is for anybody who watches my weekly videos. Basically, if you follow my tips and other people's tips, because we'll contribute and people give their advice as well, hopefully between us we'll get all our half-hardy or tender exotic plants through. So I've got a few questions coming in, and we'll kick off with the first question. So let's have a look. So the first question is from somebody called R. So hi R. Says, hi Kris, should I dig up my pink china and divide it now or in spring? I'd like to overwinter it in a plastic greenhouse so that I can divide it and get lots of early growth rather than waiting later on. So basically, yes, you can dig them up now, or you can wait until they've been frosted. So, enjoy the plants as long as you can right now in the garden. And then as soon as they've been frosted, which hopefully won't be into November, maybe December, then you can dig them up, divide them to as many plants as you want, and then keep them warm in winter and grow them basically as house plants if you wish, so that you're bulking up your stock and you can start next spring with more plants. Of course, they're hardy enough, pink china colocasias, to keep them in the ground over winter as well. That's something I would do. I keep mine out in the ground and they come back so well. Last winter was pretty bad in terms of it was pretty cold for a long time. So I mentioned it before. We had three different periods, December, January, and March, where it was very, very cold, sub-zero for many days and nights. And most of my pink china survived. Not all of them, but over the summer they have bulked up again and I've ended up with more plants than what I started spring with. So overall, they're doing really, really well. But yeah, pink china is one of my favourite sort of half hardy or really hardy-ish for a lot of us tropical exotic looking plants for the garden with their large leaves, and they do flower as well. I've seen a few people on social media this week have seen some flowers emerging, some yellow creamy like tall flowers, quite unusual looking, but they're not the most amazing flowers really, but they're just sort of an unusual quirk of the plants because like all plants pretty much they all flower, or obviously ferns and things, but most plants do flower. And normally I found it's in spring, but it can be in autumn as well. I'm hopefully not talking to myself and his sound is working, so I'll just crack on because I think hopefully the sound is working. Before I go to the next question, I mean, I'll just sort of point out we're in October now and close-ish to the closest to the shortest day, which is December the 20th, 21st. So between now and then is the same sort of time period as the shortest day to the end of February, early March. If you think about what the garden looks like right now, still looking lush, verdant, lots of plants are still looking great because we've had no frost or cold weather. Compare that to late February, early March when the garden can look very different indeed, but yet, it's the same distance or time between now and the shortest day to early March. Complete contrast in terms of what's growing well because it's so warm now, and obviously it's had all year for the plants to be doing well. So let's see if we've got any more questions. I think we do. Hi, Daniel Vickers. Hi, Pam Geezer. Nice to have you on board this evening as we go through these questions. Got a question now from Kudos. So Kudos says, when should I split cannas? I'm going to struggle to get it in a pot over winter with the size of it. So it depends if you've got them in the ground or not now. But you can split them now. If you do split them now, I would sort of try to keep them somewhere definitely frost free over winter. A lot of people wait now and sort of either leave them in the ground as a big clump or in a big pot and then bring them frost free over winter and then divide in spring. But you can divide at this time of year if you wish. Personally, I think probably I'd wait until spring because at the moment, if you dig up a plant, if it's one solid of a lot of rhizomes, it's relatively compact. You know, it's got its soil around it or its compost around it, and you can keep that with digging up in one place that doesn't take up too much space. Whereas as soon as you start dividing it and putting it in separate pots, then you're meaning you're going to have to take up a lot more space because obviously you've got loads more compost around individual rhizomes. So, but if you've got loads of space, you can divide it now as well. But personally, I would do it in spring when once you start dividing it, it will start growing pretty quickly because it's warmer because it's spring. But yeah, you can do it now, providing that you've got somewhere definitely frost free. I wouldn't split them now and then replant in the garden. But I leave most of my cannas in the ground. I've got the tall Alisteinii canna, and that grows 2.5 meters tall. That stays out in the winter all year round. Last winter, I didn't even mulch them, and they came back just as strong as ever and did really, really well. Still flowering out in the garden right now, and they're also setting lots and lots of seeds as well. And that's one thing I've seen people sort of putting on social media about, can you collect seeds from cannas? Well, you can, but not all cannas. Most of the commonly grown cannas don't produce viable seeds. So things like Canna Durban and Tropicana and Cleopatra, those with the pretty variegated leaves, they're sort of hybrids. They've been grown or sports of natural selections of other cannas, and they don't grow viable seeds. So they'll flower and they'll have seed pods, but there won't be any seeds in those. Whereas things that are species, cannas will get viable seeds. And like I said, my Canna Alisteinii is absolutely covered in loads and loads of seeds at the moment, collecting them for sowing in spring next year. And another point about cannas and also gingers and bananas as well. If you're growing them in pots, they all grow from rhizomes. These rhizomes do get bigger and they will sort of deform pots as well. So if you've got it grown in a plastic pot, then they will stretch and push against the sides of the pot, and you will need to probably cut them out to get them out of the pots if they've had a really good growing year and those rhizomes are swollen up really well. Okay, so let's see what else we've got. So we've got a question from Mr. Chuffy. Hi, Mr. Chuffy. I know everyone asks about onsets, and we are all set to dry store ours, but we have 2 or 3 that are way too small to dry store. What would you do with small onsets? If you've got onset bananas like onset Morellii, onset Heniba, ventricosum, and it's not grown too big because you've got it, you've grown it from a very small plant or you've got it as a plug plant later on in the season and it's just not bulked up, you can't dry store it because it'd be too small to get through winter dry stored. So you have to grow it pretty much as a house plant or semi-dormant house plant. And to say how big it needs to be to dry store, basically, you get your hands, get round your hands like this around the stem of the banana, and get your hands all the way around and touch your fingers and thumbs together, and it's too small to dry store. You can't, so if you're really struggling, I mean, obviously you can't tell for scale how big I'm doing this, but if you're really like that and you can't really get your hands around it, that's big enough to dry store. But if you get your hands around it, I mean, too small and won't dry store, or it won't dry store for long enough to get through winter because it'll dry out too much and it'll never start going again. And dry storing is one of the ways you can do it. There's a couple of other ways which I've mentioned in my videos. I've done loads and loads of overwintering onset banana videos. I think the one I did last year was sort of looking at onset bananas, and depending where you live, what conditions you've got a greenhouse or a garage or a porch, whatever, I did a list of which ways probably will work best for you depending on your setup. So that's a really good video to check out just to give you an idea about size and what heating they need over winter. I'll do a link to that in the description below. If you're watching this live, obviously you can ask questions. If you're watching this after it's finished, the live stream, you can still ask questions in the comments on YouTube and I can pick those up as well. And I think for those, just so those, as a bit of a thank you for those that are watching tonight, I will do a bit of a giveaway as well. So if you carry on, stick around watching this live stream, I'll give away a free plant. Not decided what that is yet. You might get to choose. So later on in the live stream, I will say who wants a free plant, and then the first person who replies with the word I say at that point will get a free plant, possibly of the choice. Depends how big it is. Depends if I have it in the garden. So that's something to look out for later on in the live stream, probably near the end. So, see if we've got any more questions. So we have got, it's a comment from Lee Craddock. Left my pink china in the ground and they came back, used bark chippings as mulch. Yeah, so if you want to make sure plants are on the border of being hardy to half hardy, get through, and the things that will come back from the ground. So we're talking about some of the hardy colocasias, talking about dahlias, cannas, gingers, those sort of plants which have storage of their energy underground in bulbs and rhizomes and corms. If you mulch those plants once the first frosts have passed, then it gives them a better chance to get through winter, because basically what you're doing is putting a layer of insulating material over them to stop the cold and frost penetrating and getting through to those plants. It's a bit like obviously putting on a blanket for yourself. It stops the cold getting in, and obviously the longer the winter or the colder the winter, the thicker the mulch needs to be to make sure that the cold doesn't penetrate through the soil or through the mulch into those rhizomes, because he's trying to stop the rhizomes, bulbs, corms from freezing through and getting destroyed. So, next question. Thought I've answered this a little bit, but yeah, question from Pam Geezer. Do variegated cannas produce viable seeds? I've seen mixed things. Well, they can do, they could do if you've got a species canna that's happened to show a bit of variegation. I think most named cannas that have variegation are hybrids and don't produce seeds. Most aren't species. There probably will be some species cannas. Species canna is basically a naturally occurring plant that you find in the wild that we've just grown as garden plants, and it will obviously produce seeds because that's how it carries on and reproduces in the wild. So if you've got a canna with some variegation and you've been told it's a species canna, then it could produce viable seeds. But like I said, not all, but most variegated cannas will be hybrids, so they won't produce viable seeds. But if anybody knows of any variegated species cannas, then put the comments and we can share that information on this live stream. Okay, next question is from FK. So FK asks, would you think it was too risky to keep agave attenuata in pots outside? Obviously, the first question you need to ask yourself is, where do you live for this? But this agave is one of the more tender ones. So for 99% of the UK, then it's a definite bringing it indoors plant. It's not even just covering it outside plant. It needs to be kept pretty much frost free. Well, it does need to be kept frost free really to be looking good and survive through the winter. So this is one of the more tender agaves that you can grow. Beautiful agave, it gets quite large, really sleek leaves. And especially if it's in a pot, I would say needs to be kept frost free. But if you live in a very sheltered coastal location and you can bring the pot close to your house wall, then you might have a chance. But definitely, I would say from 99% of us in the UK and a lot of us in Northern Europe, and those that are watching in North America as well, it's definitely an indoor job over winter, unless you're in Florida or somewhere like that. I mean, if there's anybody watching tonight from anywhere around the world that isn't the UK, then say hi in the comments, and I'll do a shout out to you. Hi, Great Northern Exotic Garden, how are you doing? Hi, Roger B, and good evening, Angela, as well. Okay, next question comes from Richard Burnett, who asks which, if any, exotic seeds should be sown in winter. So I know a lot of us want to garden all year round and start thinking about the next season already. In terms of exotic seeds that can be grown in winter, I would say anything that's really erratic to germinate can be sown in winter. So onset banana seeds and Musa banana seeds can be grown in winter because sometimes, yes, they can germinate in just a few days, but quite often they can take many weeks, if not months. I've known some people wait 2 or 3 years for their onset seeds to germinate. They can be really erratic. So you don't want to just wait till spring to sow these because you might not get them to germinate until the following winter because you need to grow things like onset on heat mats anyway, really warm temperatures, at least 25, 30 degrees if you can do it. And that's the sort of temperatures they need to germinate. Fresher seeds germinate quicker or more reliably than older seeds, but older seeds can germinate, but they can be so erratic. So those are the sort of seeds that I would sow in winter. Anything that's really quick, like the things I grow in spring for big foliage plants like ricinus, I would definitely not sow in winter because they grow really quick, really big, and then you're stuck with a big plant which doesn't have enough light or space in winter. It reliably, germinates really quickly. So anything that's really erratic, I would sow in winter. So you can pick up seed packets. It'll say on the back how long it takes to germinate, and if it says anything like several months, then those are the seeds that I would sow in winter. Okay, the next question is from Matthew Cartwright. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Kris. I have a small Gunnera which has been in the ground for a few months. It has about 4 smallish leaves. Would you suggest overwinter? How would you overwinter it, basically? I'm assuming the Gunnera is one of the hardier types, so Gunnera, Cryptica, manicata, or Tinctoria. If it is, and it's been in the ground a few months, it will get through nearly all our winters, if not all. I mean, like I said, I don't know where you're located. So if you're in top of Canada, then it will definitely die if you leave it outside at that size. But if you're in the UK, maritime climate, you'll find that Gunneras will get through pretty much all our winters. Obviously, I always have to sort of say if you're top of a mountain in top of Scotland, then the advice might be different. But for most of us, it is totally fine. You can mulch them with the old leaves, so let the old leaves die back a bit and then just sort of put them over the top. If you're really, really uncomfortable thinking the plant might not survive because it's very small, you could even mulch it with something like straw over the top as well. But really, unless it's a really weak, tiny plant that you've planted and it's not really grown any roots over the few months it's been in the ground, then it will get through fine, providing not a weak plant like that. Been growing in the UK for well over 100 years, all over the UK, not just in Cornwall. It's been in other places as well, and it's got through, really bad winters. Think about over the last 100 years, we had the coldest winters. We had 2010 was really bad, but then you go back to before I was born and before many of us were born, 1962, 1963, I think, was like the winter that went on forever from December all the way through to March, where the snow was on the ground for like 3 months. And, plants got through. Many exotic plants were grown even back in the 60s, maybe not all across the UK, and a lot were just down in the south, but they got through those winters as well. Right, just time for a sip of tea. So another question, let's have a look. So another question from R, which is totally fine. I'll answer all the questions as they come in order they come in. So what tips do you have for growing Arundo donax? Mine are about 4 foot tall. I was hoping they'd be bigger. It's my first year of growing them. So there's 2 or 3, maybe 4 types of Arundo donax that you commonly see in exotic gardens. The most common one is the plain green species, also known as Spanish reed. This can grow pretty tall, so we're talking 3 to 4 meters, might be even taller than that once established and with plenty of water. So yours has only got to 4 foot tall. If it's a small plant, then maybe that's totally fine in its first year. But to get it to be really big, then you want to give it lots and lots of water. Where it comes from, in Spain and from the Mediterranean, it will grow with sort of in ditches where it's always got a constant supply of water. So yes, it will grow in normal garden soil. I have it in normal garden soil and it grows to about 2.5, 3 meters tall. But if I wanted it to grow even taller, then I would water it more or grow it in a really wet, boggy condition. It does spread out a little bit, but it's not aggressively so it can be controlled quite well. It will grow underground rhizomes, but it doesn't self-seed around the garden, so it's not too much of a thug in the garden. But you can split it really easily, divide it as well, providing you can get through the rhizome and sort of, pass it on to friends, family, neighbours, etc. It's a really good, forgiving, large grass that you can grow in the garden. You can feed it as well, so you can give it lots of manure, bloodfish and bone in spring. Chicken pellets are great as well in spring and summer to get bigger, taller plants. But even with neglect, providing it doesn't dry out, it will do really well, easily get to 2.5 meters every year once established. And then you've got the variegated types as well, which will grow less vigorous, so you won't get them as tall, but you can still get them, towards 3 meters tall. I've seen one not far from me that's just in a normal garden border, and it's been 3 meters easily every year for the last sort of 10, 15 years, and it doesn't get much care and attention. Grows that big every year. It is less hardy though, I will say that. As a small plant, pretty much across the board for every sort of plant, if it's a variegated plant, normally got less vigor because it's got less chlorophyll in the leaves, and it means they don't grow as strongly and they can succumb to the very cold winters as well. Hope that answers your question. Next question comes from Roger B. Let's get that on the screen. We have lots of newer Musa basjoo sprouted. Can we simply dig them out, pot them up for friends, or use to reposition? And that's from Rog and Liz in Leeds, so not far away from me in Wakefield. So Musa basjoo, you can divide them. If you divide them though, whatever time of year you choose to divide them, just make sure that the pups, so the smaller plants that are going from the main stem, have their own roots, because very often they can grow sort of 30, 40, 50, even 60 centimeters, looking like decent sized plants. But all that stem is actually joined to the rhizome of the mother plant, and it's actually grown no roots of its own at that point. So just sort of look around the soil and move the soil out of the way. Look where the plant is attached to the mother plant. Make sure it's got roots before you divide it. And then once you've divided it, then I would say pot it. I would pot them on rather than replant straight away. I'd like to give them some nice new compost and keep them, growing for a few weeks to get the roots in the pot before you plant them out. At this time of year, it's not the best time to be dividing Musa basjoos because you really want to keep them growing once you've divided them. So it's more of a spring or early summer job to divide Musa basjoo. But I have divided them in the past in autumn before and put them into pots and kept them frost free over winter, and they came through winter fine. I wouldn't sort of divide Musa basjoo at this time of year and just replant in the garden or leaving pots outside over winter because it's not established in its new pot. But yeah, you could divide them now or get smaller plants and keep them probably frost free if you can over the first winter if they're very small, and then hand them over to friends and family the following year. Hi, Richard. Hope you're doing well. Next question from a few cartwright again. So we've got a Zantedeschia giant Hercules, which I recently bought as a small plant. It's in a pot in the bathroom. Would you suggest keeping it indoors over winter? So I grow this plant as well. I actually planted mine out as a very small plant and it got through winter, but I can't remember. I can't tell you now if it was a very mild winter when I did that. I would, yeah, probably do what you're doing. It should be hardy. It's got through winters for me, all the winters for about 7, 8 years in the gardens. It's got through some pretty cold winters. For those that don't know, Zantedeschia Orthopica giant Hercules is a large sort of arum lily with large white spathes, large white flowers in early summer, so late spring. They're much, much bigger than the normal arum lily. And normally, if you've got spotted leaves on arum lilies, then they are tender or on the tender side. If you've got plain green leaves with no spots, then they're definitely hardy. So I've got the plain species and I grow it in the pond. I grow it on the side of the pond and just in the garden, and that gets through every winter with no mulch or anything. It's totally hardy plant. The giant Hercules, like I said, once established, seems pretty hardy. I've had no issues of it dying back over winter and not coming back. Obviously, the foliage dies down in winter, but the plant remains alive in the ground. So if it's a very small plant, you said you've got it in the bathroom. Yeah, you probably can keep it there if you're happy to keep it in the house over winter. As long as it's not too warm, I'll keep it, cool if you can. You don't want it to be trying to grow through winter. It should be naturally sort of dying down a bit as we get cooler weather. So I would keep it in a cool bathroom if you can, or a cooler room. Or if you're thinking it's trying to grow too much, then you could keep it outside, providing it's not really, really cold. Hi, Anne. Good evening to you. So next question's from David Moore. Can chopped up canna, ricinus, and other green stems be used as a mulch? So I don't use them as a mulch, really. They're good as a bit of a adding nutrients back into the soil because obviously they've grown all summer from the nutrients you've put into the ground, those leaves, and then you sort of returning it back to the soil. But once you've had the first few frosts, you'll find the foliage, especially like cannas and pretty much all green stem plants that are tender, go to slime very quickly. They go brown, black, and they just go like sludgy slime because they're so full of water. And that really doesn't protect plants. So it doesn't work as a mulch to protect plants because you just got slimy, wet material on top of the rhizomes or the plants you're trying to protect. Woody material is what you want to use as mulch. That's why we use straw because it's hollow and it's dry and it's not, it doesn't get too wet easily. Compared to, dead leaves that have gone wet, just stay wet over winter and they'll freeze and then they'll just go slimy again once they thaw out. But the stems of things like cannas and musas, if you leave them after the first frost, then what they will do is protect the initial growing point where they're attached to the rhizomes or the corms of the plants. You could leave the stems. So basically, you'll your nice banana plant, you've got your nice cannas, they're growing away nicely, they've got upright stems, they've got the leaves coming off. The frost hits them, sort of wilts down a bit, but the initial, the stems. So like in my background here, we've got cannas, that's Canna musifolia. Those stems, even after the first frost, will stay upright for quite a while, and then you get the really cold frost or more frost after week, and those stems will sort of lie down because they'll start to get degraded and destroyed by the cold weather. And what you can do is either you can take it all away and just mulch the ground with a material like straw or wood chippings or old compost, or you can leave everything just to die down naturally and then sort of mulch over the top of that. I like to take it all away just to tidy it up a little bit at that point and then put the mulch on that I want to keep through winter. So I don't know if that answers your question or was I just rambling too much there? But basically, yeah, really wet material doesn't work as an insulating mulch very well, but the upright stems do help a little bit for a few weeks before they do sort of degrade. Hopefully, that's your question, David. Mr. Chuffy's looking forward to getting a big Jabea plant when he wins it. Well, we'll see. We'll see what plant, and we'll see when that competition starts near the end of this live stream. See what we can do. So, next question from Richard Fraze. I rescued a few 75-year-old yucca plants, 5-6 foot trees with around 4-inch thick trunk. To protect them this year, they have grown unprotected for many years. If you've got, I mean, I'm making assumptions here. I'm making assumptions you're in the UK and you've got yucca plants from an outdoor location rather than somebody's old greenhouse. So I'm assuming you've got like yucca, Spanish dagger, something like that that's been around for many, many, many years. Obviously, 75 years plus in the UK. Assuming you're in the UK. And so these have been grown outside. These are tough as old boots. So these are -15 with no issues whatsoever, unless they get spotting in sort of very wet winters. But in terms of cold, it doesn't destroy the leaves or the stems of a few of the really hardy yuccas. I mean, people grow yuccas in colder areas of the United States and into Canada as well. So yuccas range from obviously Mexico and the Central Americas, and they get tender types, and then you get plants grow in America, USA, can be very, very hardy indeed. So if you've got 75-year-old yucca plants that have been growing in the UK outside, and you've dug them up and divided them or whatever you've done with those, they'll be fine outside. Even if they freeze through in pots, they will come back. They are tough as old boots. In fact, I have a yucca in the garden that I had a couple of yuccas when we first moved in that were already here, and I dug one of them up because it was in the wrong place. I didn't want it. A big old thing. And the last 10 years, even though I dug up the whole plant and dug out what I thought was pretty much all the root ball, it keeps coming back. One little stem keeps coming back, growing a little rosette of green leaves every single year. And for 10 years, I have just cut it off at this time of year and don't want it to grow where it is. So I've been trying to kill it off and it keeps coming back. So they are very tough, resilient plants on the whole, on what type of you've got. So I'm making a few assumptions in that answer, but hopefully that answers it for you. Third question from Matthew Cartwright. I have a few small Trachycarpus fortunii planted in the garden. Will you dig these up and leave them to take their chances outside of winter? I am in the Midlands, by the way. Thank you. So, again, I have a few small Trachycarpus planted in the garden. You dig these up and leave them chances outside. No, you don't need to dig them up. Trachycarpus fortunii is hardy. It's hardy from seedling size all the way up to big plants. For most of us through most winters, it's just if it doesn't get through winter, it means you've had one of the worst winters on record, basically. So it is a hardy plant. It grows obviously over in Asia and China, and it grows in places where it sees lots of snow, lots of frost, lots of sub-zero days and nights as well. And it will get through a very cold winter. So -10 is no issue. It will be damaged at things like approaching -15, but even at -15, it shouldn't kill bigger Trachycarpus fortunii, and even small ones should come back from below -10. And I've had seedlings literally in a tray, frozen through over winter, and they all survived and came back fine the next year. So they are pretty much hard. It's pretty much the hardiest exotic plant you're gonna grow. Definitely the hardest palm tree we could grow that grows well in the UK. So I wouldn't dig them up. That'll set them back a bit. If they're in the ground and they're growing, then just leave them be. They don't need any protection and totally fine over winter, unless they get completely flooded and underwater for weeks on end, something like that. But general garden soil will be totally fine. So I'll be interested to know for those who are watching and listening tonight or watching afterwards on YouTube on Catch Up, if this is your first year growing exotic plants or have you been doing this for years? Have you tried any new exotic plants this year that you've never grown before that you're hoping will get through winter, or do you know they'll get through winter? If you've got any comments, For first time people growing exotic plants, that'd be great to hear from you this evening. Let's see if we've got more questions. Next question from Eddie Priest. It's hi Kris, I have two large Musa sikkimensis about 10 foot tall. Too large to come inside. Any ideas of the best way to overwinter these based in Birmingham? So they are variable in hardiness, but most of them come back well from established rhizomes. So if you've got a big plant like this, if it's 10 foot tall, you haven't got space to dig it up and bring it in, then you're gonna have to leave it in the ground, and you can treat it like Musa basjoo. So you can put a big straw cage around it. Yes, you can use other materials, but straw is cheap, easy to get hold of for most of us, and you can get a thick enough layer of insulation around it to protect the pseudo stem. Or you can do what I did last winter, which was chance it. So I didn't protect my Musa sikkimensis all last winter. I left it to the elements. I didn't protect it in the slightest, didn't mulch it, didn't put a straw cage around it. And we had a pretty cold winter. We had -7.7, like I said, 3 periods where it was very, very cold. And yes, it got cut down to the ground, but it pupped, and we have 3 plants growing from the plant that died last winter, and they are now over 6 foot tall, all 3 pups. So it's come back really, really well. Whether or not it can do that year after year after year is yet to be seen. But generally, if you've got a large plant that you can't protect, then you're going to have to protect it in the ground. And Musa sikkimensis is a good candidate because it's got some hardiness about it. Like I said, it's a bit variable. Sometimes you'll find, because these are grown from seed on the most part, sometimes the seed has come from a stock of seeds, a stock of plants that were a lower growing areas where it was warmer, so they're not used to the cold temperatures, and they might not make it through winter. But a lot are grown quite high up, sort of in the Himalayas area and that sort of area, and they will come back, grow well. And obviously, if you get it to come back and it grows the second year back up to 5-6 foot, something like that, then if you've got space, you could dig that one up, keep it frost free over winter, plant it back out the next year, let it grow to 10 foot again, and when it's too big, repeat the cycle of letting it die down, coming back from the rootstock, and repeating. So yeah, it's one of those that are on the borderline of getting through winter with the stem and sometimes not. Birmingham, it's a big area, Birmingham, but generally is pretty cold because it's inland, and most winters it is a bit colder in Birmingham, is where I live, even though I am pretty inland as well. So next question is from Hugh Martin, and this is a question about purple sugarcane. Would it respond to digging up, splitting, putting into pots in a polytunnel to survive winter and to multiply it? So I will answer this question, but I have not grown purple sugarcane. So my answer to this question is based on what I've read and other people's experiences. And I'll also say a lot of people were sold purple sugarcane over the last couple of years that isn't purple sugarcane, not the tropical plant at all, but actually a type of miscanthus, another grass which is purple and is totally hardy and totally fine. You might have that and you might not need to do any sort of protection. It'll get through winter anyway. But if you've got a true sugarcane, which is a totally tropical plant, will not survive outside whatsoever. You will need to bring it in and keep it totally frost free. You can also grow this from cuttings. It's quite an interesting way to do that as well. Or you can split it, but you're going to have to keep it warm over winter. From what I've read from other people's experiences, like I said, I've not grown purple sugarcane myself, but just do a bit of research, make sure they have got the true purple sugarcane. Because if you haven't, and it's just a really nice decorative grass that's actually hardy, then you're probably onto a winner because you can just leave it outside. So I'll probably do a bit more research and to see where you bought it from, and maybe contact them to see if they've had any advice later on, or look at the photographs online of true purple sugarcane compared to other grasses like some of the miscanthus grasses that can be purple as well. So that's not a full answer because I've not grown that plant, but hopefully That information will help you a little bit. The next question from Simon, and this is about Begonia luxurians. So I bought a Begonia luxurian to replace a Schefflera that the freeze took. The Begonia needs to stay out over winter. How best to protect it? Well, it's not a hardy plant, is Begonia luxurians. It comes from Brazil, and for most of us, it will die over winter if we leave it outside. For some people, if you live in a coastal area or down south in quite a lot of the cities where it's not too cold, it will grow a bit like a returning perennial. So if you've got it in the ground, mulch it, come spring, it will resprout and grow away quite well. Even in the north and the Midlands, you can leave it outside of winter, and in mild winters, it will grow back a little bit, but never really get to a good size if it's been in the ground over winter and still back to ground. It really is, for most of us, a half-hardy, well, tenderish plant that you need to keep inside, frost-free over winter. You can either keep it frost-free and keep it as a house plant, so you keep it in the green so it'll grow over winter, have nice green leaves, or you can cut it back and keep it somewhere frost-free but not actually actively growing. So when I say frost-free, I mean you keep the temperature around 5 degrees, so you've got then a bit of a dip and go down nearly towards freezing, but never down to 0, 1 or 2 degrees. So you want to keep this frost free if you can. So it's not the best replacement for a Scheffler really, although it looks like one, but more tropical in terms of the palmer leaves. It's on the most part less hardy than a lot of the hardy Schefflers. So I would say, yeah, if you want to keep it going, bring it indoors if you can, or like I've done and will continue to be doing so for the next few weeks, I'll be taking cuttings of my Begonia luxurians, growing them on as tiny little plants over winter on a windowsill, get it through that way so I'm not carrying a big bulky plant to overwinter. Next question is from Angela. Hi Angela. How should I overwinter my small pineapple lily plant? So if this is a eucomis, which is often called a pineapple lily, then a lot of them are hardy for most of us and will be fine in the ground or even in pots if it's eucomis bicolor. Other eucomis are less hardy than bicolor, but a lot of them are still hardy, so it depends which type you've got. Most have got a degree of hardiness and will get through in the ground. And yes, you can mulch them if you wish. The easiest one to grow is bicolor, and that is, I've had that for 15 years in pots in the ground, and I've never lost any. I find it, very hardy plant indeed. There's ones like sparkling burgundy that are pretty hardy as well. Paulownia is pretty hardy. All these have been, good doers for me and come back every year in the garden. If you actually mean a small pineapple plant which you can grow, you need to keep that growing over winter and keep it above 15 degrees as a house plant if it's a real true pineapple plant. Hope that answers your question, Angela. But we're near the end of the questions, but we have got quite a few more. So let's see what the next one is. Black spots on Camrops, Chemops, Shamrops, Humilis, despite dry covering. Any ideas? Yeah, it is black spot. So loads of plants are prone to getting black spot. The most common plant you see in most people's gardens that get black spot is roses. And roses have been grown for hundreds of years, and growers have been trying to get black spot resistant types of roses, and there are quite a few species that are, or a few varieties that are resistant to black spot. And it's fungal basically, so the spores are in the air and they land on a plant, and then they grow and damage the plant when they take up the nutrients as they grow and cause yellowish and then black spots on them. We often get them after it's been wet as well. So if it's in a poorly drained soil, plant's more stressed and it's unlikely, it's going to be less healthy. It's more likely to get attacked by the fungus that naturally just in the air. Some plants are more likely to, like I said, just to get them. So Chemops humilis bootier palms as well, they can get black spot. But you find it differs from plant to plant. You can grow, you can grow several Chemaerops humilis in your garden. Several might be really bad black spot on the older leaves, and one next to it or in the middle of it, plant might be completely untouched because it's just not prone to get into black spot. It is luck and chance. So if you're buying a plant or any plant, but especially a palm tree, look out for black spot. And if it's got loads of black spot, don't buy it. Go for ones with nice, healthy green leaves. So yeah, you can spray it as well. So you can spray the spores are more likely sort of in autumn. You can spray it in spring as well, just to kill off the spores before they attack the plant or grow on the plant. So yeah, if you've got lots of leaves with black spot, if it's really bad, then you can cut off those really badly effective leaves, but unfortunately you might have to learn to live with it or get rid of the plant if it's really, really bad and keeps that year after year and it's something you're unhappy with. But like I said, a lot of Chemaerops humilis do get bad black spot. Some Yuccas do as well. So ideally grow it in really well-drained soil, somewhere where there's good airflow as well, really helps prevent the black spots. If you've got loads of plants growing around it, more likely for the fungus spores to be in the air and to land on the plants and grow. So try to get good airflow as well. So a good comment here from JH about trachys dying in pots. This is true. So I mentioned earlier that they're really hardy. So bigger plants need more water to keep going. And generally what happens with big plants in pots of winter that have been frozen through is they can't take up any water whatsoever because the pots are solid. It's got ice in there. The water isn't able to get into the roots, and it's basically like a desert. It's like it's been dried out, desiccated, and if it's frozen for long enough, the plant will slowly die because it's dried out, basically. It's the same as not watering a plant for 2 weeks and frozen for 2 weeks. It's similar sort of thing because you can't get water into the plant. And the bigger the plant, the more water it needs. So in some ways, it's got a chance of drying out and dying from that rather than actual cold killing off the plant cells and killing it off that way. So that's quite often what happens with big plants in pots. In really bad winter in 2010, extremely hardy bamboo plants that I had in pots at that time. I had a black bamboo, Phallostachus nigra, that died in a pot, even though it's extremely hardy because it froze through and it was frozen for weeks and weeks and weeks and just didn't get the water in the plant. So when it thawed out in spring, it died very quickly, even though it's a hardy plant. Same plant in the ground would have probably been totally fine. So we are coming up to nearly 50 minutes. Normally when I do these live streams, I say finish after an hour, and we'll try to keep it to around an hour, but we'll see how many questions carry on coming in. And I won't forget about the free plant giveaway as well, which will be coming up soonish, probably. Hang about for that. You got a chance of winning a nice little plant, which I can post or you can pick up. Unless you live abroad. This is only for UK, by the way. Let's see. Next question. The next question from Rich. I have a Paulownia tomentosa in a pot as I never knew where to put it. It's about 2.5 foot tall. Does it need any special winter care or is it okay in a pot? No, I mean, again, this is a very hardy tree. I mean, I call it a tree. It really is a tree. It needs to be ideally in the ground and it will grow large and the roots quite woody and will actually, will grow suckers as well. So if you dig up an established plant, you'll find the roots left in the ground will probably stick up a new plant as well. So if it's in a pot, then like mentioned with the big Trachycarpus or any big plant, if it get a really bad winter, then it's got a chance of dying. But with this one, with a Paulownia, unlike bamboos, unlike palm trees, Paulownias are deciduous, They lose all their leaves in winter, which means they don't really need much water at all in winter because they've got no leaves to support, just got the stem and the roots, so they can dry out quite a bit more. So it is a good hardy plant. So I have had them in pots, and I've got through literally plants that have grown from seed, got to the first end of the first growing season, kept them in pots as tiny-ish plants, got through winter fine. I mean, if you've got it in a pot and you can move it, put it next to the house wall. And I would say that of any plants that you care about that might not be completely hardy and you want to make sure they get through, bring them towards a house or a warm south or west facing wall, and it'll just give that extra heat and protection from the winter sun onto those plants and the walls. Warm up the root balls of those plants to keep them frost free if possible. Gunnera manicata, when when we overwinter, should we remove the large flower that they have this year? Third year of growth with us, and can we use this to propagate? So, um, you can sort of remove the flowers, and you could have done it early in the year because obviously the flowers, if you remove them, the energy is not going into the flowers; it'll go more into the leaves to grow bigger, healthier, or more leaves. But most people leave the flowers on because they're really unusual. They look, interesting in the garden, and I've never found that they have self-seeded, but Gunnera tinctoria definitely does. It's classed as an invasive plant in some parts of Europe and west coast of Ireland. It's naturalized as well, so it will self-seed in good conditions. I have seen people also get the fruit or the seeds from the spent flowers without touching them. Because apparently, if you touch the seeds, it can stop them from germinating. So people cut up bits of the decaying flower stem and flower areas, and we've still got the seeds on them, little orange seeds, and they just chop them up and put them in seed trays and then grow them on, and you get tiny little plants growing. So you can do it like that, or you can divide your gunneras as well. The Gunnera manicata, which is often tinctoria and now being reclassified as Gunnera cryptica as well. Very complicated, but the big giant rhubarb Gunnera plants you can divide quite easily in spring to get more plants if it's established plants. And some people have succeeded with seeds, but I have not tried to grow them from seeds. I've not seen any seedlings here in the garden, but like I said, in many places they have naturalized, so it should be able to grow from seed relatively easy if you just let them go about their own business, basically, in good conditions. Hi Shane, how are you doing, Mrs. Stark? Well, we're still carrying on. We've got a few more minutes left of this live stream, and then I'll be doing a giveaway at the end of the live stream as well for a plant in the garden. So, next question is from Uncle Buck. A good film. I'm looking to grow ricinus next year. Can you clarify if it's just a seed that is poisonous that I should avoid growing it? Thanks in advance from sunny Devon. Ricinus, the whole plant is poisonous. The seeds are potentially deadly poisonous. It depends what you mean by poisonous or how you react to, you know, how much that affects you. Because so many plants are poisonous. Daffodils are poisonous, tulips are poisonous, buttercups are poisonous, but we don't really worry about them in the whole. And some plants are poisonous to people, totally fine for animals, and vice versa. So things like lilies are extremely poisonous to cats, but they're bad for us if we ate them, but they're not lethal to us. Whereas ricinus, the seeds especially, are extremely poisonous and definitely could kill if people ate a lot of the seeds. The leaves, the stems, the roots have poison toxins in them, so they can cause to be sick if you ate lots of them as well. But how often do you go around eating plants in your garden that aren't from the vegetable patch? Well, probably not very often. And animals, if you've got a dog that likes chewing up leaves and stuff, even just chewing up a leaf, you know, I can't give a full disclaimer saying they won't die, but most shoot up and spit it out, you know, it won't kill them. But if you ate a load of seeds, then it would. So yeah, it's a whole topic in itself, poisonous plants and whether or not you should grow them and or what safety measures you put in place. But people grow ricinus plants in gardens, and people have them in parks displays. People have them, you know, they're grown in stately home gardens, and also I've seen them growing all over public displays without much thought really, or you know, worry that they're going to cause people to keel over and die. But yes, they are poisonous. All parts of ricinus is poisonous. If you're really worried and you want a poisonous free garden, then yes, don't grow ricinus. But they grow really well in Devon, so you can get some really big plants trying to grow them. So, quite a few more questions. But before we go on further, I want to show you a chart which I did a couple of years ago, which you might find useful. So let's just head over to that chart. So hopefully you can see that. I know the red is a bit blurry, but I'll just talk through this a little bit. And this is basically about, on the left-hand side, a column of lots of different types of exotic plants. And then we have got a timeline from September all the way through to May or June, all the way through autumn, winter, and spring. And basically it's how to overwinter all these plants. We've talked about quite a few of these already. So we talked about Musa sikkimensis and Musa basjoo, and onsets we've talked about. We've touched on quite a lot of these plants earlier in the live stream. But this chart sort of gives you an idea. It's a rough idea. It's variable. It depends where you live, what sort of winter we get, of course. But this will give you a decent idea about lots of different plants and when you need to start protecting them, or even do you need to protect them? Do you need to lift them up? Do you need to protect them in situ? What do you need to do with them? So on here, got different colors in different months. So if I give you an example of the, let's have a look. If we looking at tender begonias, we talked about the Begonia luxurians earlier on, halfway down the list. I've put Begonia tender, and I've put for September and early October and mid-October to propagate them. So basically take cuttings from these plants, because if you take cuttings from these plants, then you've got some stock to get through winter in a warm place, and then you can pot them up, grow them on in spring, and have nice plants to plant out or have a nice pot display following year. So that's why it's blue for September, October. And then the next column, I put red for late October. So this is the latest really for tender plants. You want to be digging them up and bring them indoors and keeping them frost free if you didn't take cuttings. And then the months after that, obviously, I've not put protect them or anything. You need to dug them up by the end of October, early November, before the first frost, ideally. And then you plant them out right at the end, sort of in May, June, depending where you live, after the frosts have finished in your location. So this chart goes through lots of different plants and just gives you an idea. So if you've not grown loads of exotic plants before, or you've tried something different, not foolproof this. I've erred on the side of caution, and I've given sort of an average for the UK. So if you live in the south or more protected locations, then this might be a bit different. If you live in Scotland or you live somewhere extremely high and exposed, again, it might be a little bit different. But for most of us in the UK, this chart is pretty accurate for most winters, unless we get an extreme event, either really hot or really cold, something crazy like that happening. This is a good solid base to think about when to protect plants either in situ or dig them up or whatever, and then when to uncover them in spring. So I'll leave that on the screen a few more seconds. If you've got any questions about this, you can ask them as well. But I've just noticed we've got to 8 o'clock. I have been speaking for a full hour about overwintering exotic plants. I'm going to go back over to the screen, and then I'm going to see if I've got more questions. So let's have a look. Next question I can see is from Dave McMaster, and it's about Schefflera taiwaniana, which was planted in spring. It's not grown much. It's on about 6 inches high. Should I dig it up and bring it back indoors for winter? Now, generally, if it's established and it's growing well in the ground, this is pretty much the hardiest, or one of the hardiest hardy umbrella trees that you can grow in the UK. If you've had it since spring planted out and it's not really grown much above ground, I'm hoping it's been growing good strong roots underground. So if that's the case and it's got some woody stem on it, so it's not just a green stem, look at the plant itself. If you've, if you very, very slightly tug at the plant and it's not coming up, as in it's got really good roots anchoring it down, and you've got some brown on the stem or beige or fawn, basically, as long as it's not totally green, the stem, and it's got some woody material, and it should get through winter. So even if it's a very bad winter, it might lose the top growth, the green growth, and come back from the woody base or the woody stem. So have a look at the plant and see what yours looks like. I wouldn't be digging up plants like this because you're disturbing the roots. Ideally, they want to get the roots down in a nice, happy place they want to grow, basically, and you don't want to be disturbing it. Some plants you can dig up year after year and they don't mind. Other plants, if you dig them up, they'll sulk and really won't like it. So you're probably best off leaving it in the ground, providing you've got some woody material. Like I said, if it's totally green, then you might want to dig it up. But at this stage of the year, if it's been planted since spring, you should see at least base of it should be woody at this stage, mature wood on the plant, because it will grow into a tree eventually. And once it's happy in the ground for after years 1, 2, and 3, it should really romp away and get quite tall indeed. Next question from Dan Bevis is, I've got a few varieties of colocasia. They've all pupped. Can I split them and grow them as houseplants over winter? Yes, you can. Most colocasias are very tender. We've talked about pink china early on as one of the hardy ones we can leave in the ground. Most colocasias are truly tropical, subtropical, and will die if you leave them in the ground. They need to be dug up, and you can split them. Most will pup or send out runners and grow little new plantlets at the end of the runners or along the runners, so they can be potted up. And providing they're warm over winter and they're kept watered over winter, then they will carry on growing as houseplants. So don't put it in a cold room. Don't put it in a windowsill where it's unheated. You don't have a radiator on. It needs to be warm over winter, growing if you keep splitting up plants like colocasias, especially the more tender Hawaiian types. I would keep them growing over winter and keep them at least 15 degrees and they should be fine. But I say water them like pretty much all houseplants over winter. They're not growing strongly, so you really ease back on the watering. Some houseplants, talk about things like cacti, you don't water them at all from now until sort of March time, like zero water. You don't need any water for those. Obviously, other plants, not like cacti, they do need water throughout winter, but you need to keep them on the dry side of winter. Don't let them sit in water. Most people kill houseplants by overwatering more than anything else. Sometimes you can think they're totally dry by the top of the compost, but they're in a pot by the poor drainage, or it's really saturated, thick, peaty compost underneath that's really wet and saturated, and that will easily kill plants and lots of houseplants. So be mindful of watering any plants that you bring indoors. See if we've got anything else. Hi Nick, you've seen the chart that I've posted earlier. Great, I'm glad that's useful information. David Moore asked about Colocasia Redemption. This is a relatively new Colocasia, fantastic black big leaves with pinkish reddish centres. It's not a Colocasia I have grown before. It's one I want to try in the future. So you'll let me know next year how it goes over winter. I think I'm right in saying it's one of the more tender types, but I might be wrong. There's a couple of dark Colocasias that are not hardy, but they've got a bit of hardiness about them, so it might come from that side of things. So let me know how it goes for you over winter. I've got a feeling, I'll definitely err on the keep it probably growing over winter. But if someone's got lots of plants, try it in different, try it different climates, different temperatures over winter, and see how it gets through. It is like you got your mixed information. You've put, David. I put your question into it. Yeah. So yeah, you've had mixed information. That's because it's a new plant to the UK. Really, it's not been here for many years. So not many of us have been growing it. So there's not much experience of this one. So most people have kept their prized new plant growing over winter. So we don't really know how hardy it is. My feeling is it's probably one of the tender ones. So we'll find out. I think we are at the end of the questions and we've done an hour. So I think that's it for this live episode. Thank you for everybody that's watched, and for those that are still watching live right now. I did say I would do a giveaway. So there can be a bit of a delay in the answer into comments on YouTube. So I think I will give away either Colocasia Pink China or a Canna Alisteinii. So it's something that I can post easily or can be picked up, and it's relatively hardy and it's a nice plant to grow. If you're interested in a Pink China or a Canna Alisteinii, or I've actually got bamboo Trachycarpus gigantea as well, which I probably can do as well. So the first person that I see write the word Blackpool will win that plant. So first person who says Blackpool, this random word, they can have one of those plants, and I'll solve that out for you. So hopefully not a massive delay, and hopefully somebody wants either a Trachycarpus gigantea, Caleta or a Colocasia Pink China, and they're going to write the word Blackpool on the comments. Oh, look at that, all at the same time. Thank you all those that tried. So, oh yeah, there's lots there. So I will scroll up. It might be in a different order that you're seeing, but the first one I see is Mr. Chuffy. There you go. Mr. Chuffy said Blackpool. You were the first on my list. Then it was Rich. Then it was Eddie. Then it was Kudos. And then lots of other people. But the first person on my list came up on my screen was Mr. Chuffy. You can win one of those plants. So just let me know which one you want, either now or later. On YouTube comments on this video. So thank you everybody for watching. I'll be doing more live streams if people are interested and people watch these videos. And join me next week